what you find most of the time is most donors don't get thanked. Most donors don't get receipts and confirmations. Most donors don't get asked for a second gift. It's like we focus so hard on the acquisition piece, and we've missed the ability to go cultivate people in a meaningful way, particularly in digital channels.
Yeah.
The good thing is that all these AI tools that we're talking about and maybe making fun of a little bit give you the capacity to do all those essential things to go scale the human relationship.
Nathan Hill, welcome to the Sustainable Giving Podcast.
Hi, Dave. It's good to be with you.
It's good to be with you, buddy. We got to hang out a few weeks ago in Dallas at an event, and I love I don't know that I love events, actually, honestly, Nathan. I think what I love is getting to see people like you and hang out and just be like, oh, it just reminds me of we are not meant to live Zoom lives.
100%. I feel similarly about events. I always look forward to them, and I also dread them, like, equally. Like, the travel is whatever. Sometimes you go to a fun place, and that's cool, and try new food, but it's just like, it's a slog to travel. But the
Yeah.
people and the relationships and all of that, like, that gives you the energy every day when you wake up after a long night, ready to go again. Like, oh, Dave's here. All these beautiful people that I see in all these corners of the nonprofit world, and they're all under one roof today.
Yeah. Well, I think our listeners can relate for sure when it comes to these events. But you and I had a chance to participate on a panel together, talking about some actually the topics we're going to talk about today. And so I thought, man, let's get you on the show. You and I go back a minute. And really, I think today the conversation for me that's exciting is this combination of how do we use data and technology to grow sustainable generosity without losing the human element that sustains it. I think sustainability is not just an energy usage technical term. Sustainability is like deeply rooted human term. And so whether we think about that in giving or in tech or in data, like it's all comes back to just that human element.
Yeah, and that's at the heart of all of fundraising, and I think always will be. I think we can lose some of it here and there and get distracted, but at the end of the day, that's the core of it. So how do we scale that? How do we use the tech we have to scale it? I think that's what we're going to dive into. So
Yeah.
let's go. I'm excited.
It's going to be good. So let's start a little bit with how you got into this space in the first place. Today, we'll fast forward eventually to you are with an organization called Avid. We'll talk about what Avid is, what Avid does in a little bit. But just start, what drew you into nonprofit marketing and fundraising, and what keeps you here?
What keeps me here? Oh, okay. That's an interesting question. Yeah, I mean, could spend the next hour talking about how I got here. I think like a lot of people, I kind of like accidentally fell into nonprofit. There was never like a plan. I didn't wake up one day like I'm gonna work in the nonprofit space and I'm gonna work in marketing and do all like no, there was never a plan. A bit of my background, my first nonprofit job, I actually was a counselor at a kids day camp when I was in high school.
Same. Although I don't know
Yeah.
I don't know that you can count as a job. When you're a volunteer, that doesn't count, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Forget it. We'll get back to that. Camp
This is
Sunshine. What was yours called?
Camp of Champions
Oh,
in Central Illinois. So that's where I started, I guess, as my first nonprofit job. So I did that in high school, did that in college. Ended up, I mean, I was actually planning and did study Bible. So I went to Moody Bible Institute for school, thinking I wanted to work in like church work and pastoral type of stuff. And pretty quickly, we'll get into the details of it, but pretty quickly realized I don't think this is for me. I don't think that's what was really in front of me. I'm grateful for my time there and education there and all that sort of stuff. But while I was there, even as a student, just needed a job. So I'm looking around for different things. And I played in a band in high school and college. And so we had a MySpace where I had been like, learning quote unquote HTML and CSS to like make my page look cool and all this stuff. Like I have web experience. And so I applied for some jobs in like the marketing department, publishing web content. So that was my first, like, I guess, real job in a more, formalized nonprofit kind of marketing type of setting. And after I graduated school, I started actually running all of their email marketing. And so I was there for about 4 or 5 years. In the marketing department, getting to serve certainly the donor team. So there's a lot of work on the fundraising side, but serving everything from like the higher ed side to the radio and media side to the publishing house side. So very quickly, in a short number of years, got exposure to a kind of a lot of different corners of the nonprofit world between marketing, fundraising, and then just a lot of different flavors of that. Um, yeah, so that's where I started. That's kind of how I got into this world in the first place.
Yeah, so then you think about, fast forward, you and I met, I've always known you as kind of this combination of certainly digital, as far as like a broader sort of channel set, but also just somebody who's a lifelong learner. And we're going to get into that in a second, but what's keeping you around this space? Why not go back and, you know, get the band back together?
Yeah. Well, I don't know what well, that that those days of being in that band have well, I think they're long behind me at this point, although you could behind me, you see my drum kit and my guitars and stuff, and I dabble in all that. Yeah, but what keeps me here? I mean, part of it's what we just talked about. Part of it's the people and the relationships, and there's a lot of really, really, really good just human beings in this space that are doing good work. Are focused on missional kind of minded things. How do we go serve people and serve the world and make things better, right? And so there's a lot of passion that's just kind of driven there by those just really cool and meaningful relationships. um, I also get a lot of joy. I get a lot of energy just from teaching, and training, which I've had the privilege of getting to do a good amount of that over the past probably 4 or 5 years. Doing a lot of training in the digital fundraising space and kind of the optimization space, and increasingly so, especially now today, more on like, how do you then take data and turn it into action? And I really love just getting to see like light bulbs go off for people. And I'm not somebody who like I have not sat in like a lead fundraising seat, so sometimes I feel significant imposter syndrome, but w- where I get to sit is help people make some of those connections of how does my data actually help inform my strategy, and what tweaks can I do here to kind of optimize and grow. And that's always really fun, especially knowing that at the end of the day, like the ultimate outcome of those little light bulbs going off is certainly more funds raised, but also just more people impacted by really meaningful causes. And so
Yeah.
there's a lot of reasons I stay, but those are some of the big ones.
Yeah. Oh, we're going to get into that intersection of data, technology, and sustainable giving in a minute. But I want to talk about sustainability and leadership, sustainability as a human being working in this industry. And so, Nathan, one of the topics of conversation when we were together is this kind of like, what does it mean to be kind of a resilient, sustainable leader? Like, how can you be sustainable? I mean, cue all the, cliches about the pace of change. And you and I were talking just before we started recording about how many, tabs I have open on my computer for somebody told me I need to use this AI tool now and I got to use that one now. And it's like, but, 2 weeks ago, that one was trash, and now it's amazing, and 2 weeks from now, it's gonna be something else, and so, but one of the things I've appreciated about you is you have this posture of just a generous, educator, for lack of a better term, like, you seem to enjoy learning, but also teaching. Where does that instinct come from?
I don't know, man. It's
Yeah.
somewhere hardwired in there. I don't know where the instinct comes from, but I don't know. I that's kind of just been a driving thing my whole career. Oddly enough, I even look back to like when I was a kid, I had incredibly low self-confidence and was one of the shyest people that you would have ever met. Um, and so then fast forward to now I speak on stages and webinars and all sorts of stuff. And so I've certainly grown in that over the years, but yeah, in my career, I've kind of always had a bit of a hand in doing whether it's like onboarding for a new employee or your peer coworker to help them get up to speed. Like I've always kind of leaned in there. Even had some opportunities kind of early on to go do some trainings for some of like Moody's like global partners where we're kind of taking here's some things we're learning as we're trying to grow how we reach more people with
Mhm.
with media. Let's go take it to our partners that are we took a trip to Romania and a bunch of people from all the kind of surrounding countries came together for like a 2 3 day workshop, and they called me Mr. Digital, which I'm like 23 and don't know anything, but
I've been called Web Dave before. That was in the olden days, so I can
Yes.
relate. So, but
Which means
one of the things I love about you is you've actually not just you're a teacher at heart, but you've literally created education, you've created insights, you've created courses, you've actually really gone much deeper than most in terms of your own learning, but also then how do I teach others? And, what do they say? The best way to learn is by teaching. And so I'd love just, any insights into, you know, um, what it looks like to help, if a leader's listening today and they're like, man, I just feel like, cue the pace of change stuff. What does it look like for a leader? Like, what are some of the qualities you've really appreciated about leaders that you've seen in terms of how they learn and just kind of help us get some insight into that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think about leaders that have been in my life and career that I have certainly respected, and there's a lot of people I've learned from, but thinking about it like from the sustainability side of things. Um, I don't know. I mean, some of the best leaders that have been in my life are certainly people that are always just open to change and open to dialogue, open to listen to new concepts and ideas, certainly. Um, I think you can get to a certain point in your career and life where you can kind of be closed off to new concepts and ideas just because like we've always done it this way. We've always seen it work in this way or that way. And so like you can almost become narrow-minded. But constantly like challenging yourself to think outside the box and just be open to other creative ideas, to test things and try things that you maybe you don't even think are going to work, but even just for the for the sake of the getting the cycles of trying something different, because then you might also be surprised along the way. I think that those are some really critical
Mhm.
skills to just always be kind of challenging yourself. And if we get stuck in a rut, then we're never going to change, we're never going to grow. So that's certainly something that I've observed in some key leaders in my
Yeah.
life that have helped spur me along.
Well, just to geek out for a little bit, because, when you're creating a course, for example, which not everybody's done, I have not done. I've done a lot of education and teaching, but I've not created something that's like, I got to bring somebody through. I have to create some sort of transformation. I have to keep them around. Like, I can't lose them after session two or whatever. Are there any, just as you think about that, that's putting you on the spot here, but, kind of insights or things that you think about in terms of like as a quote unquote educator,
Yeah.
bringing people along?
Well, so I don't have a formal education in like an education in education, right?
Yeah.
That's
Like
not like
human
that.
design or whatever, yeah.
Right. My sister does that. Like that's her whole thing. So I'm taking a bunch of ideas from her as we chat and all that kind of stuff. Um, so I've certainly improved in my understanding of that and how to kind of apply some like pedagogical, is that how you say that? Anyway, teaching concepts
That's a great one.
as I just butcher it. But I've certainly grown to that over the years. And I think if you go back to like maybe some of the first courses I was putting together, a lot of it's just really like long form lecture. I've got all these thoughts and learnings from different experiments and whatever. I just want to get kind of dump them out. And people don't absorb information. Very few people absorb that type of information in that way. So fast forward to now, always thinking about like how do you break this down in different kind of like learning styles? And yeah, some people want to see it. Some people want to get their hands dirty and actually like mess around with something. And I have to break it in order to learn how it works, whether that's something physical or that's something like putting I don't know, fundraising appeal together.
Mhm.
So just kind of understanding those different ways that people approach learning and ways that people absorb information. Also just like especially today, people absorb information in like chunks that are just microscopic. And you see that
Mhm.
even even in little things like how people post on LinkedIn. I've seen some people lately complaining about like the short one-liner, don't write any more than like two sentences at a time, like complaining about that type of
Mm.
writing style. But also that's kinda how people engage with any form of media or information today is like, give me the headline. If I like it, I'll read the next line. If I like that, then maybe I'll read a little bit more. It just happens like this, which changes how you put together something like a course. You can't necessarily divulge, here's 3 hours of information. I need to figure out how do I give you something that's gonna kinda whet your appetite for the next 10 seconds and then get you to the next 10 seconds.
Ugh. Is there any place you see? I'm just thinking about the role of how nonprofits and really nonprofit leaders actually learn or don't. Are there any place where you see leaders getting stuck when it comes to just learning and growth?
Hmm. That's a good question. I mean, I even think I just was doing a webinar a little bit ago. We're talking about some things related to, I think we'll talk about some of this today too, but some benchmark type of things, what's going on in fundraising. And I don't know, there's definitely a mentality amongst a lot of people who have been in the space for a while of like, this is kind of how it works because it's always how it's worked. Um, and that's obviously really challenging when you approach things like learning. If you're kind of entrenched in a particular viewpoint and you haven't kind of built those repetitions of skills to challenge yourself, challenge your own thinking, you can get stuck in a rut of not actually really wanting. And I would say it's a desire to absorb new information and try something different. So we talk about part of the conversation earlier today was about even things like looking at donors not through a particular channel, but looking at them as people that engage across a whole bunch of different channels. And like one of the questions immediately sort of went to like uh, talking about kind of putting donors in a bucket based on their transaction type. Like that's not really where we are today. People don't really behave in that sort of way, but it comes from
Mhm.
we've always measured things in particular channels. And so that's kind of how I've been wired to think. And so we have to almost rewire our brains to think differently.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's bridge over to talking about how are things changing, and so a lot of topics we can end on here. Let's start with technology. You can go whichever way you want with this, but how do you see technology reshaping fundraising right now?
Well, you said it a little bit ago. Like all the different AI tools that are out there, and the idea that one could show up today and then it's going to be gone next week, either because of a lawsuit or because it got bought or because it just totally shut down, or it's just the landscape of tech is. And I'm not even like an expert in this field. I'm not like I wouldn't describe myself as like a technologist, but the landscape of tech is just changing so incredibly fast. Um, and I think this is something as someone who has lived kind of in the digital fundraising, digital marketing, communication space for my career, like it's something we always talk about is the pace of digital is just so fast. But the past, I would even say 6 months, especially certainly the past like 3 years as AI tools have kind of come on the scene, but the rate of change continues to like rapidly accelerate as we get kind of deeper into this like AI bubble. Um, and that creates tremendous challenges, even for people that are actively focused and even their job is to try to keep up with what's going on. It's impossible to keep up with all the different tools and changes that are happening, let alone how you can actually leverage them to be more effective and to be more efficient and to save time and all that sort of stuff. So then go add in the layer of like, if my job is a fundraiser and I spend all my time focused on donor relationships and all that sort of stuff, how do I possibly carve off the time to keep up with what's emerging in the latest AI tech that I can actually then inject back into my fundraising program and then change all my workflows and all my processes and actually change how my whole team is structured because it requires that if I'm going to bring this like that's like it's impossible for a fundraiser to keep up with. It's overwhelming.
Yeah, it reminds me. I was just giving a little talk. I have a talk that I give called um, "Surfing Waves of Innovation" because me,
Hey.
good surfing metaphor. If you read the Wave Report, it's all about the surfing lessons. But no, one of those lessons, and I remember because I grew up in Southern California, and I remember going to the ocean, and I didn't know how to surf, but I'd like go out on the pier, right, and I'd watch the surfers in the water, and I thought, man, these lazy bums. They're just, like, sitting around, like, are they surfing or are they just, like, sitting and talking or whatever, and I just thought I kinda, if I'm honest, prejudged them because I was like, "Oh, classic surfer dude," just slacker, and, until I actually took a surfing lesson, Nathan, and I was like and one of the first things they teach you is not every wave is worth catching.
Mm.
And it's like I'm in the water. I remember as a kid going out with my friend's surfboard and trying and just failing because and one of the things I learned in hindsight is that I was trying to catch every wave. I was like, here's another one. I got to catch this one. And then here's another one. And I got to catch this one. And if you're in the ocean, you're doing that, like you it's not good, right? You can't breathe, you can't keep your
Yeah.
head above water, and I'm sure listeners, and I know I've been there, where you just feel, like, "Man, I can't keep my head above water," right? And so, I think one of those lessons that we need to take away as leaders is not every wave is worth catching, and so you've gotta watch the waves, and there's a discernment process of actually paying attention, right? You don't wanna get blindsided by a wave either, but to discern, is this way for me? And so, like, for example, to go back to the AI tools, I have a dozen tabs open on my computer, not because I want to be stressed out by them, but because I just want the like, all right, these are the dozen that I heard in the last week that I need to use, but I'm going to wait for either a moment where it seems to make sense. This is what I think each of them do,
Yeah.
or I'm gonna wait for another person to say something and just see if there's enough sort of proof for me to play with this. And so, sure enough, over the course of the last 2 weeks, I've played with 2 of the dozen. Like,
Okay.
oh, and actually both of them are quite helpful. Actually one, just to as an example for our listeners to have one more tool on their list is called Whisper Flow. Have you used Whisper Flow?
I've not used it. No. Tell me more.
Okay, so Whisper is basically, this is going to undersell it, which is exactly how it was sold to me. It's just dictation. Like you can hold a key down. Like I can start, I won't do it now because it'll probably mess up our recording, but I can hold a key down and it will immediately not just start translating the words that I'm saying really well, but it'll remove all the oops and ums and I was
Mm.
thinking out loud. Like, so it's not like dictation where I get in my
Yeah.
head, Nathan. If I'm like, I need to dictate this email, I'm like, I'm trying to edit it while I say it out loud. My wife can do this with text. And I'm like, I don't know how you do that, but my brain goes to mush when I'm trying to like dictate something that's eloquent or articulate.
Yeah. I can't do that either. The way that I
Whisper.
is like,
Yeah.
well, I'll draft something, but I'm like tweaking this thing. I don't like how this is, and I'm going to change this, and I'm going to come down. It's like usually I think my brain kind of goes like step by step, logical
Yeah.
like order, but not when I'm writing. It's a mess. It's all over the place.
Yeah. So Whisper, a friend of mine, Nathan Chappelle, he's been on the show, was telling me, he's like, dude, I will just talk. Like I'll be driving and I'll talk for 25 minutes. I think I want to write a article about this and I want to not say that, but this other thing's important. And it will actually then turn it into a coherent, like, thought. I'm using it mostly as like a really cleaned dictation version. But it's as an example because we're gonna keep talking about tech. I wanna move to some of the things that you're seeing in terms of tech and data around sustainable giving. But just to illustrate for our listeners and for you and I, that's an example of a wave that I thought, I don't know at first, and then eventually it's kept coming back to mind, and I thought, you know what, I'm gonna check this out. So
Yeah.
literally, this is like days ago as we record this. I was like, I'm gonna download it. They got a 2 week trial, and I'm like 3 days in, dude, and I'm like, this is amazing. And
Well,
so
now I'm inspired
now
to
you've
go.
heard it. Now you
Yeah.
and all of our listeners.
Right.
Okay, so let's talk about specifically some data and some donor trends. So I want you to share just as context so that people understand who's this Nathan guy and what's this Avid place? What is that a company? What is that? So let's start there. And then I've got some questions about just some of the trends that you're seeing in fundraising, specifically with sustainable giving. So tell us
Yeah.
about Avid and kind of what you do there.
Sure. Well, as you know, my name is Nathan Hyde. Um, yeah, so I obviously the VP of marketing at Avid. I left out like a portion of my career as where you kind of asking me how I got into nonprofit. I just to kind of fill that gap in. I spent some time, as I mentioned, kind of working in marketing, communications, fundraising at Moody, and then spent the next 9 years at an agency called Next After working in digital fundraising. That's where I got to go build what we called the Next After Institute, and with a lot of training and workshops and certifications for fundraisers, trying to figure out how do we do this digital thing and actually see growth from it. And so that's where I've spent most of my kind of career at, there doing a lot of teaching and focused on digital optimization. And then joined the Avid team about a year ago, and Avid was actually kind of incubated and birthed out of the agency of Next After, where it was sort of a tool behind the scenes that was helping with some data analysis and that type of stuff. And eventually we sort of realized, "Oh, there's actually there's a product here that I think is going to fit a really um, important kind of gap and growing problem that we're seeing in the nonprofit sector." So we launched Avid, and essentially what it is, we call it the fundraising operating system. It sits on top of your whole fundraising tech stack. So everybody's got a CRM, and you have your email tools, and you have your donation pages, your donation platform. You have data over here, data over there, this tool, that tool, and none of them really talk very well. Even if they do talk in some way, usually there's still data that's trapped over here that doesn't come to your CRM and all that. So we sit on top of that in order to bring all of your tools, all your data under one roof, and allow you to actually then really take action on the data that you have with an AI assist to help you see, what's working, what's not, who should I talk to next, automate your segmentation using all of the data that you actually have available to you, and then even go create campaigns for you, again, with an AI assist to help you take what might normally take, 3 weeks to a month, maybe even longer to put a big campaign together, and do that in a matter of minutes. So then you can focus on the things like, how do I go talk to the next right person and really steward this relationship I have with this, potential major donor well, and focus on the things that matter the most rather than kind of the nitty-gritty work of just like connecting the pipes of tools and moving data from here to there. So that's kind of what Avid is in a nutshell.
Yeah, so it's not just, hey, plug this thing into your platforms and visualize your results or be able to analyze. But it is that. You can do that. And it's not just creating campaigns or like ways of communicating to people using this AI assistant, but it is that. And it's not just then being able to actually activate those, right? Because if I'm remembering correctly, people can then actually use the platform to then create an audience in, say, Facebook and be able to message that audience. Is that right?
Exactly. So it's kind of like it's sort of the missing link that has been missing in our fundraising tech stack. So again, where nothing really talks to each other, and we lose all this momentum as a fundraiser, as fundraising teams, as we're moving data from place to place because I need to go talk to maybe people who haven't yet given this year. So, but they gave last year and they have a really high lifetime value, and I want to reactivate them. So I need to go pull a query from my CRM, but it doesn't kind of do everything. So I got to do a bunch of stuff kind of manually to go pull that list together. And I got to go put it in all these different places and channels. So an operating system brings all those things under one roof. Yeah, use your best in class tools for your CRM and for your advertising and for your email. But what if you could manage it all in a singular place to save you just a tremendous amount of time, make you that much more efficient and more effective? Because now you can actually leverage all
Yep.
the really critical data that has been stuck in all these silos.
Over the past few years, as we've worked with dozens of organizations to grow sustainable recurring giving, I keep hearing the same thing from leaders. They don't just want tactics, they want community. They want to know that they're not doing this alone. And for some teams, they're not quite ready for our sustainable giving deep dive accelerator, but they are ready for something more accessible, something that helps equip them, not just one person, but their whole team. That's exactly why we created Rise. Rise is a new implementation focused group advisory program designed to help organizations grow recurring giving that actually lasts. It's a place where we turn insights into action, and then action turns into momentum. Inside our Rise program, you'll get live group advisory calls, office hours with me, ongoing education and training, access to guest experts, and a private community where you can ask questions, share ideas, and learn from peers who are wrestling with the same challenges you are. You'll also have access to our advisory team, so when you're stuck, unsure, or deciding what to try next, you're not guessing alone. Here's the heart of it. You don't have to grow sustainable giving on your own. Rise is where leaders grow recurring giving together with guidance, accountability, and forward momentum. Enrollment is open now, and if this sounds like something your organization or your team needs, I would love for you to learn more or raise your hand. You can visit sustainablegiving.org/rise to explore the program or to express interest. We'd love to have you grow with us. Again, that's sustainablegiving.org/rise to sign up or let us know that you're interested. Looking forward to seeing you in the program. Well, one of the cool things about what you've done, and we've gotten to play with this a little bit, is because you have this data across different platforms, you're able to look at some trends. And so, I'd love to put you on the spot if I could to just ask
Yeah.
you. We're going to talk in a little bit about a big data partnership you actually just announced. But first, I just love your insights as somebody who's been thinking, strategically about fundraising and specifically on the recurring giving front. What are some of the things that you're noticing as you look at the data?
Yeah. Well, so we launched a brand new benchmark, really, just a few weeks ago, and it's in partnership with our friends at Wyland. And so we're looking at about 1,000 organizations, about 14 billion in total revenue. That's billion with a B. So very significant sample size. And one of the things I'm most excited about related to the benchmark is that it's not like a historical look back necessarily. Like, most benchmarks that are out there, almost every benchmark that's out there is typically it's 6 months at least out of date by the time it gets published. This one is updated in real time because we have this kind of 360-degree look into the data of all these
Yeah.
customers that are using Avid and some data coming from Wyland, et cetera. And so we can see in real time, like, how are we actually doing? So you can take insight today and actually turn it into action and know it's meaningful and not 6 months old. So as we're looking at that data, there's some really kind of interesting things going on. I mean, the high level, I think if you just kind of skim the surface, you might say trends kind of look like they've looked for the past few years. You've got a slowly declining total number of active donors. And the people that still give tend to give a little bit more than what they gave last year. So it kind of washes out where revenue is increasing a little bit kind of year over year. It's not quite keeping up with the pace of inflation. So net impact is actually down, but it's not so down to cause like big giant alarm bells. That's sort of the surface layer. But if you go a little bit below the surface, um, I don't think the trend of this fewer donors, larger gifts is gonna last. I think it's kind of a bubble that's gonna burst at some point because that can only, just by nature, only go on for so long unless these few donors that are left continue to just accumulate. If it's only like the quote unquote 1% that's like giving, that maybe I guess we're fine, but that bubble's gonna burst at some point, and some of the underlying signs are already there. You have retention of these high value donors is declining, and it's declining faster than your kind of, broad-based donor. So we're losing them out the back door pretty quick, and then when you go look at the pipeline of who's the next mid-level donor, who's the next major donor, our upgrade rates, so people who maybe are starting at the kind of smaller gift level and then upgrading to giving at a larger level, those have like fallen off a cliff in the past 3, 4, 5 years. So we've got lower retention of those donors. We've got a weaker pipeline, but we're over reliant on them. So this is like a perfect storm that in the next few years, at some point, again, the bubble's going to burst and we're going to be in a really tough spot.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's we haven't talked about this because this is a wave report that's coming out in a few weeks as we record this, but it will be out by the time people listen. And that is, you'll appreciate this, Nathan. It's about the it comes out just before tax day, April 15th in the US. And so it's on the one big beautiful bill, which I have to chuckle every time I say those words out loud. Who names them that? But one of the things that is interesting, the Lilly School of Philanthropy just came out with a report on sort of an analysis of what is anticipated to change. Because in the U.S., whether we like it or not, our sort of governmental friendliness to generosity does influence, and the headline, ironically, is the opposite of what you just said, Nathan. In that,
Mm,
that overall giving is actually projected to decrease. That's the bad news. But number of donors, number of individuals participating in generosity is expected to increase, which
it's
is
interesting.
wild. The first is discouraging to me. And by the way, you can go read the post. We'll put it in the show notes. But the short version is because of certain caps on, ironically, wealthy people giving as well as
Yeah.
corporations, that will have a cooling effect on the very mega gift, the large gifts or mega gifts.
Yeah.
At the same time, the universal charitable deduction basically means that 90% of Americans who have not been able to have any sort of tax benefit to giving because they don't itemize,
So
um, are now able to itemize. And so their math at the Lilly School of Philanthropy is that an estimated to nine, almost 9 million new households are expected to start giving over the next few years. But, and this is where you, Nathan, and I, and our listeners come in, not if we don't actually tell donors about it,
right.
and not if we actually don't encourage generosity from everyday donors.
And that's where, I mean, the intersection of those, I think, really comes together. So if that really is going to slow down that significant giving, that just means that that bubble's going to pop faster, right?
Faster. Yep. And the urgency to actually inspire generosity writ large, which is what we're all about, and I know
Yeah.
what you're passionate about, goes up.
Totally. And it's what's interesting, there is some natural kind of momentum on the like bringing new donors in the door as we look at like acquisition. So that's really interesting how those things kind of intersect because there is this sort of slow trend. Some of the numbers are a little bit depressing because you go look at like the change in new donor acquisition rates over the past 4 or 5 years. Most of them are in the negative, but like the negative change keeps getting less every year, but still net down. But it's like it's
Less bad.
less bad, and then less bad, and then less bad. And then the past like 2 years now, so there was a minor uptick about 24 months ago in that kind of window in terms of acquisition. And then in the past 12 months, there was a dramatic spike. And so overall, at least in our data universe, which again is 1,000 nonprofits, there's a 50% uptick in terms of new donors coming in the door. The interesting thing is when you drill into that a bit, it's not everybody. In fact, there's a lot of organizations that still saw declines in terms of total new donors, but you've got a couple verticals like public policy and advocacy organizations that saw like 100+% increases in new donors in the past 12 months. And then your like arts and culture and humanities type of nonprofits saw, I think it was like 80-90% increase. So they're kind of skewing
Interesting.
everybody else's data, but there is still that kind of like trend that's in there a bit of more new donors kind of coming in. So if that can be then multiplied then by what's happening on the tax side of things, and then maybe we end up actually being in a pretty good spot. But it's back to like you said, it not if we don't actually do something about it to tell people about it and actively bring new people
Yeah.
into philanthropy and into generosity.
Well, and people do, to be clear, I don't believe people are like, ooh, tax benefit. I'm going to start becoming generous now, right? I don't think that's how it works. It is a piece of the puzzle. In fact, I was just interviewing a donor the other day. We do some donor interviews for our clients as we talk about what caused you to give to this charity, especially on an ongoing basis. And one of the things that this particular donor said to me was, one, they came from a faith background, and so while they're not engaged in any faith at this point, they just saw the behavior of uh, what they refer to as tithing, as something that's like an admirable thing. At the same time, this person's giving in the level that, again, we didn't talk about the one big beautiful bill, but these are the types of donors that are like, man, I feel like it is part of my moral or civic or faith duty to give to others, and that might include time and my attention and relationships and advocacy, but it also includes dollars. And
Yeah.
so you pair that with a generation that's clearly passionate about making a difference. And now you can actually say to a 20 something, like, if I did the math, that's $1,000 a year for individuals or $2,000 for married couples. So that's the deductible amount,
Yep.
even if you don't itemize, which means you could go as a charity to your donors and you can say, did you know this year, 90% of Americans who have been left out of being able to receive benefits for generosity now are able to. And for $83 a month, you can move the mission forward and lower your tax bill. And so it's like we always talk about incentives in fundraising. Like sometimes it's a match. There's a match that's going to double your gift, or we're going to send
Yeah.
you a copy of the book. Or in this case, Again, you have to be careful, because if they donate $83 to multiple organizations, they can't call all of that a deduction. But you can basically point out that that is a benefit, and so it's not gonna be the first mover, it's not gonna be the reason people give, but I do think it's an example where we might see some of what you're saying because that trend of fewer donors, more dollars. I mean, that's why I wrote The Rise of Sustainable Giving is the generosity crisis is real, and we need to turn it around. Fun fact, by the way, for those of you that have read the book, chapter 23 quotes a Mr. Nathan Hill, around the topic of specifically crafting. And I want to go here next with you, Nathan. What does it look like to create an ongoing value proposition? You
Mm.
and the team at Next After have really maybe perfected. You've really deepened the work around the idea of value proposition. I'm adding a word to that phrase when it comes to recurring giving, and that is an ongoing value proposition because the thing that will cause you to give that one-time gift, that one $50 gift is not necessarily the same thing that will cause somebody to give an ongoing, monthly or recurring gift. And so I'd love for you to just talk a little bit about what, sort of the principle of a value proposition, if you would.
Yeah. Well, what I would teach on value proposition, a lot of what I was teaching was kind of borrowed from a company called Mech Labs that I believe still exists. They do some like A/B testing optimization type of work with for-profit businesses. And that's where a lot of the kind of like early thinking from Next After came from around value proposition was well, these are kind of some of the more bleeding edge concepts that are working with like Verizon and other big companies. What if we could bring that at least that model into the nonprofit space to help the fundraiser kind of break down how do I really communicate the things that are going to really move someone over the line? So you're thinking about kind of the core, the base of it, like the core appeal, is what I am offering in terms of the impact that someone could make genuinely not just interesting but also meaningful for the donor. Are we giving clarity in that process? Are we bringing in things like you mentioned incentives to help? Maybe if the appeals at it has a certain strength, but an incentive helps someone choose to actually take action now, or maybe to give a little bit more versus a little bit less. And so there's a lot of things you can do to kind of strengthen that value proposition. And where a lot of fundraisers default to is like minimal messaging, minimal copy. I think we've fallen into this kind of trap of like people online don't read anything, which is absolute nonsense. But then what it gets translated to is like really simplistic pages with very minimal copy. And it's like, we just have a really clean form design.
Yeah.
Well, people are going to give? Like, no, people aren't just trying to like swipe their credit card or what virtually enter their credit card information wherever they can. They need to know why their gift matters. They need to know who it's going to impact, how it's going to make a difference. They have to trust you with their money to go make that impact. And we have to use our words to get someone over the line. So then you think about, okay, take that concept and then apply it to like monthly giving. You still need to get to the point of differentiation of, okay, I could just keep giving to you when I want to and when I feel like it on a one time basis. So how do you as the fundraiser and the nonprofit help communicate the unique value of giving on a monthly basis? And that could be a whole host of different things. But we have to create that clear differentiation between here's the impact if you give once. And maybe you're going to give a $500 gift once. That's awesome. Cool. Here's the impact. What if you gave on a monthly basis and you gave $50 every month? What does that do? And how do we uniquely unpack how that helps the organization have sustainability in their budgeting and accounting so they can make sure the right dollars are going to the right places to make impact? How do you help someone understand that they can actually give at to a greater degree and help more people when they give on a monthly basis? There's a whole host of different things you can weave into that, but like at the core of it, it just comes down to that one word of differentiation. How do you make it
Mm.
stand out? How do you help people understand the unique impact?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so if the leader, is listening today, we've talked about tech, we've talked about data and how we can leverage those things. Um, we've talked about value proposition. If a leader wants to grow sustainably, um, where would you start? Like even just top of mind for you. I know that's hard to do, sort of generically, where does everybody start? It's like everybody's at a different place. But just as you think about it, I mean, you've been exposed to so many leaders. You've put together these, these training programs. Just as we record this, you just got off a presentation and, really a sector wide presentation of what you're seeing in the data. What would you suggest for leaders in terms of where to go next?
Yeah, and we chatted about this a bit, and you and I have chatted about this at different times too. But just like the role of humanity in fundraising again is never going to go away. That is like the core. And in a world where there is just so much, I think draw and noise that's trying to draw us into new tech and new AI tools that are popping up everywhere. I think we just have to keep that at the center of everything we're doing. Like the thing that stands out and is most unique is people being authentically human. And we have to figure out how we can use tech and data and AI tools and all this stuff to scale that level of humanity. But I think that's where our baseline has to be. So then talking about things like recurring giving and sustainable giving, like how do you continue to grow a program like that? Or maybe you're at a point where you haven't even really started and you're trying to figure out how do I even dip my toes in the water. I would first think about community and how do and humanity and how do we engage people in kind of in a community of people that are choosing to give and not just creating forms and opportunities where people can make the transaction, but how do we welcome them in using human touch points and meaningful language and making sure that we are laser focused on stewarding these people well. I think one of the biggest gaps when it comes to retention, which is a big problem in our sector and industry, is that there's a lot of like the what I would call the basic sort of blocking and tackling that just doesn't get done because it can be really hard to do. So, in a previous role was doing a lot more research of, hey, let's go make 200 donations to 200 different nonprofits and let's see what the downstream communication looks like. And I would always hope that we find some really interesting, exciting, innovative ways that they're like using tech and doing all this stuff to cultivate people. What you find most of the time is most donors don't get thanked. Most donors don't get receipts and confirmations. Most donors don't get asked for a second gift. There's almost nothing that happens after you give a gift with most organizations. And it's like we focus so hard on the acquisition piece and then maybe the reactivation piece when you get to like the end of the fiscal year. And we've missed the ability to go cultivate people in a meaningful way, particularly in digital channels.
Yeah.
The good thing is that all these AI tools that we're talking about and maybe making fun of a little bit give you the capacity to do all those essential things to go scale the human relationship.
Yeah, I love that. Well, and one of the things, and you all would be familiar with it. You did your own version of it. Every organization we work with, the very first thing, one of the very first things that we do is a secret donor study. We would just go and give a couple gifts and monitor that study. It's not rocket science. To your point, it's like called, sign up and take some screenshots and review some results. But every single time, and I was talking to a client today, every single time we've ever presented one of those studies, there are multiple what I call face palm moments. Nathan, are you familiar with that emoji? Where it's just like, I cannot believe that's not happening. And you always have to set it up well, Nathan, because I tell people that ahead of time because I don't know what your face palm moment's going to be, but you're going to have one or more than one. And there's always somebody in the meeting, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. That's like, I literally was told by a client a few months ago, I am not gonna be able to sleep tonight until I get to the bottom of why this donor, didn't get what they were supposed to get, right? And by the way, I love that, and we do that with all humility and generosity because the reality is your donor experience is not what you think it is.
Yeah.
Your donor experience is something, and some of what you maybe designed or intended is happening, but the reality is just between tech and platforms and, some tweak somebody made in some gift processing department, 5 years ago that you never met, is gonna impact your experience, and so
Yeah.
that blocking and tackling is as much as, it kind of briefly gets talked about and then you move to the fancy stuff, it's like that's where you're really making or breaking, your program, especially with recurring giving. How are you affirming your new single gift donors and inviting them to recurring giving? Or your new recurring donors? How are you affirming, engaging, and appealing to them in a way that is winsome? And so that's the cool thing. Like I feel like on these, in podcasts like these and other situations, it can sound really esoteric and like super fancy and you got to use this widget or that widget. And some of it's like, hey, let's just be human. Let's look at how our donor experience is, and then let's leverage the tools to actually improve that donor experience.
Yeah. And being, I mean, this kind of comes full circle back to what we talked about, which is like learning and teaching and all that sort of stuff. You have to have an open mind to being challenged and to change. And when you're presented with like, hey, go make a donation to your own organization and see what the experience is, you can kind of go in two camps. You can, if there's problems, you can retreat and say, oh, was one off, tech didn't work, things are fine. Or you can lean all the way in and say, this is not how someone should be treated when they give a gift. What are we going to do about it? How are we going to solve it? And I would always start those conversations, I think, similarly to you and how you do it too. But I would say, like, look, the worst news I could give you today is everything looks great. What we're going to see, the best news I can give you is that there is opportunity to grow. And some of it is going to be like low hanging fruit, easy stuff. Those are the facepalm moments of like, how did we miss this? But it's good news because there's small things we can do to go fix how we start these relationships with a new donor that's gonna lead to them giving again. That's the best thing if we can
Yeah.
go solve that problem.
I love that. I love that. Well, and just to bring that point home, we met with an organization that we're working with last week, did the full, review of everything, our recommendations, including their secret donor study. And there was one thing, I'll tell you offline what it was, and it was like, "Oh, that's not good." But literally in the meeting, the individual responsible fixed the thing before the end of the meeting.
Oh, amazing.
That issue probably had existed for, call it a year, maybe 2, like significant issue, fixed immediately, right? And so it's like now moving forward, that's not an issue, right? And we can really focus on the things. So I love this. This is so helpful, Nathan. I love the fact that you've invested in who you are and just candidly your journey, and going from the nonprofit side all the way from camp. What was the camp called?
You're the champions. Yep.
Camp of Champions. This is the title of this episode, the Camp of Champions. To what you're doing today, and just investing in leaders, investing in helping them to understand and to see. And I'm just grateful for you, buddy.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Well, I again back to the benchmark kind of data we referenced. That is like between us and Wyland coming together to put that together. That's like our gift to the sector because there's so much power in having those insights and in real time to help you figure out where should I go next. So if you're listening to this, you want to dive deeper into that, go to avidai.com/benchmark and you can sign up for that for free, have free access for life to those benchmarks to take some of this data we're talking about and start putting those small little things into action to make that kind of incremental change over time.
Love it. Love it. And before we go, I have one more question for you, if I could.
Bring it on.
Before I ask that question, you mentioned Avid. Where can people find you? Is that LinkedIn? Where do you recommend?
Yeah, LinkedIn is great. Just search for Nathan Hill. You'll find me. Or you can email me, nathan@avidai.com. Those should be two easy ways to find me. Would love to connect.
Love it. Love it. Okay, one more question. I always like to ask this question, as somebody who's been in the sector for a minute, I'd like to think of you and I in our mid careers, we'll call that loosely. What gives you hope about the future of this sector?
Hmm. There's a lot of really, I just forward-thinking people that I think I've connected with even in the past year who, as much as we're kinda laughing at some of these, like, million different AI tools that show up, we wanna catch the right wave, not every wave, we wanna wait for the right ones, but there's some really forward-thinking people that are I think analyzing these waves as they come up, all these different tools that are popping up and putting together really interesting solutions. And, not all that work is seen by everybody and kind of depends on who you know and what conferences you go to or you see different presentations and things. But there's a lot of really cool things happening that I think we're going to see the fruit of in the next 2 or 3 years as we're bringing a lot of these AI tools into our fundraising space. And, a buddy, David Morin, had said this maybe a few weeks ago on a podcast he was on. And I keep kind of referencing it because it stuck with me. He was talking about how, look, fundraisers run really lean teams. And so there's this fear maybe in for profit world of AI tools are going to come replace us and replace our jobs. In fundraising world and nonprofit world, that's not the case because we already run lean. We don't have room to cut these tools down.
Yeah.
These tools are coming in to help us scale, and actually we can realize really significant impact by bringing these tools in a safe and ethical way and secure way and all that sort of stuff. But I think the future is really, really bright as we figure out how do we bring this kind of emerging tech in the right way to help us scale the human relationship, right?
Yeah. Well said. Well said. I think about, if you study human history, I think about one of the examples that people use is the printing press, right? And how that transformed the way knowledge was shared, right? Because before then it was like only for the elite few that could afford and scribes and all that kind of stuff. And the printing press have completely upended. In fact, I use headlines when I share about this, Nathan, about like this new technology that people are going to use for misinformation, and people are going to lose their jobs, and it's going to people are going to manipulate other people with this technology, and they're like, oh, you're talking about AI, right? And I'm like, well, I'm talking about the printing press. um but the reason I mention that is because actually, if you think about it, the printing press was invented in 1450. Just to geek out for a second, 1450. Things like, Martin Luther's, Protestant Reformation, which leveraged the printing press. People think, oh yeah, printing press was invented and Martin Luther used this new tech. It wasn't new tech. It was 70 years. The technology had been like created, but it was until it became ubiquitous and powerful. Today, if you think about the foundations of the internet, actually date back to the 50s and 60s. And we're actually right around that, 60-year mark with what we would broadly call digital or internet technology. AI is a continuation of that. And so I'm just excited as we think to the next couple of decades, particularly in the field we specialize in, generosity and in causes and in helping make a difference and make the world a better place. How might we see the use of technology to transform the world for good? And so I love the fact that you're invested in that. Keep at it, buddy, and we'll see what we can do.
Well, thank you, my friend. It's been a pleasure to chat with you.
All right, man. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Sustainable Giving Podcast. I hope you found the information helpful and that you're able to walk away with insights that you can use to start building a steady stream of recurring revenue for your organization. For even more resources to help you build a thriving recurring giving program, go online to sustainablegiving.org. That's sustainablegiving.org. And lastly, if a leader comes to mind that you think would benefit from this episode, would you do me a favor? Would you share this episode with them? Just that little act could be the difference they need to start growing sustainable recurring giving for their own organization. Until next time, thanks for joining us.